I'm not a Gooner. At least, I hope I'm not a Gooner. But let's just ignore the fact that as we speak, I am having my very trusted artist designing a channel OC for me right now. And I don't at all plan on making them goonable or basing them off something I think would be worth gooning to, because I'm not a Gooner. I'm Gooner adjacent, in a way. Let me put it like this, I am an erotica connoisseur. I enjoy a good piece of erotica, especially that of the Blender animation type. Or just some really nice solid Kino art. There's an appreciation to be had for the level of goon quality that people make. Bravo Dives, bravo Marunia, bravo Zone 10, the classic, the one that started it all. So while you lay awake at night, phone in one hand, the other hand somewhere else, getting all red-faced and scrolling through inordinate amounts of goon material until your brain turns to mush, we're not the same. Because while you consume the goon material, I savor the goon material.
Oh, I'm fucking the dog.
I analyze it. I inspect it. I appreciate it. I don't like erotica. I love erotica. And if I don't love it, I don't goon. I have a master's degree in gooning. I took Gooning 101, Gooning Arts, Gooning Theory, Gooning Appreciation, Gooning History, but I am not a Gooner. I'm a professional. I'm a Goonspector, a Goon enthusiast. My level of appreciation for the fine craft goes above yours. I think I'm something of a Goon critic. I goon off so you don't have to. Yes, actually this sounds about right. I am the Goon critic, and as a Goon critic, I tend to have a more refined palette than most. You may get off to DeviantArt quality posts, but I look only where true fresh Kino is posted. On X. Sorry Tumblr, you've been dead for years. And I think that my years as a Goon critic allows me to answer some very important questions in regards to Goon material. How goonable is it? What's the level of goon quality? Does it follow the basic rules of goon theory? And is it even goon material to begin with? And that's what I want to talk about today. The overuse of the word goon and gooning, the failure to understand it as a concept, and the categorizing of goon material. Today we're going to be talking about goon culture, the new gen Puritan culture, and what it's doing to our current internet climate. So get your dicks out, ladies and gentlemen, because we're going to be gooning.
What?
I think to start off this video, we're going to need to get something straight and answer a few important questions. So, for this segment of the video, we're going to lightly explore some goon-based terms and give ourselves some definitions to work with, rather than the loosey-goosey definitions people on the greater internets seem to be using. For example, I don't want words to be interchangeable. Like, I hate it when people say cuck and simp as if they're the same thing. They're not. They have exact definitions to stick to, right? Same with lumping incel in the midst of that, especially because all three of these words have very different archetypes attached to them. They fall under the lonely male umbrella, but a cuck is a man who is being cuckolded by his lover. In other words, his partner sleeps with other people. A simp is a man who places a woman and or women on a pedestal, whether romantically, financially, or just out of sheer principle, to an unhealthy, obsessive degree in the hopes of getting a crumb of poon in return. An incel is an involuntary celibate, a man who wants to have sex but is incapable of getting laid, and they usually act out and lash against the female populace for refusing to give them said poon. I understand how a lot of people end up using these words interchangeably, because in terms of slang, they all equal out to pretty much the same meaning: weak, pathetic man. So if you wanted to call somebody a weak, pathetic man, you could pretty much call him any of these things, and even if they aren't true, it gets the point across. But I actually don't think that Gooner really falls in line with these. Ignoring the fact that women can be Gooners, or Goonettes as they're called, I think the difference between Gooner and incel, cuck, or simp comes down to one key factor: choice. I feel like gooning is more of an active mental choice someone makes more than being an incel, a simp, or a cuckold, especially due to gooning's entire culture being about getting worse and submitting to being a gooner, whereas an incel feels like he doesn't have a choice, and a cuck may or may not know that his partner is getting railed. So, once and for all, let's really slap a strong definition down already to set ourselves up for our future arguments. Let's define gooner. Urban Dictionary defines gooner as one who is completely and miserably addicted to porn, but embraces and loves it. Gooning is a lengthier definition, but in short, I'd sum it up as one engaging in the act of gooning is chasing a blissful orgasmic release delayed by edging and browsing and experiencing as much sensory overloaded based porn material in order to intentionally ruin their brains and become deeper degenerate addicts chasing the bad dragon. I think it's important to establish these definitions because they'll help us make stronger points later in the video, especially in regards to how we categorize goon material or goonslop. One could make the argument that goon, gooner, gooning has just become internet slang and it doesn't really mean anything, but I think that there are definitely quietly agreed upon definitions and ones everyone agrees with the most. I also think it is a bit cheap to use words as we see fit regardless of whether they're being used in the right context, especially with the difference of opinion on what they mean. Everyone gets a twisted sense of perception on what something is going to be. If you said Gamoverse is Goonslop, there will be people who, without question, automatically assume that the show has strong depictions of sexual references, fan service, and is catering to the male gaze for cheap attention, when in reality, what you really mean to say is, this show has half nudity in it and it makes me uncomfortable. But you're not saying that. You're saying, this is porn for porn heads. And today, we exist in a time where everyone reads headlines and makes assumptions about things, especially news and media, without actually engaging with the content, because if it goes against their principles, they'd rather take word of mouth rather than interact with the content that might be upsetting to them. So now that we have our definitions and some points to make against the very broad and general use of slang terms like gooner or goonslop, let's address another term and problem, goonbaiting. So what is it, and how do we define it? Have you ever heard the term queerbaiting before? It's basically a form of bait that entertainment media uses to bait queer audiences into watching their programs. This typically involves representation of queer relationships or queer characters, but it's very surface level. Like it's there, but it's never really explored or given as much attention as everything else because its sole reason for existing is to be bait to attract a particular type of audience. I think it's a bit hard to come up with real examples of queerbaiting just due to how more accusations exist rather than real examples. Some of the accused-based examples include Marceline and Bubblegum in Adventure Time, Korra and Asami in Legend of Korra, JoJo Siwa's branding, though I don't want to spend too much time breaking down why I do or don't think that the above examples are indeed queerbaiting. I will say that JoJo Siwa, to me, is definitely the one that would classify as that the most, given she was branding herself as a queer girl, girl-loving pop star, only to end up in a relationship with the worst thing imaginable for queer people, a straight white male, lmao. You might be asking yourself how exactly this pertains to goonbaiting. Well, I think both queerbaiting and goonbaiting have quite a few things in common. Both are attempts to bait particular audiences, and both are often merely accusations with no actual proof. To elaborate further, let's talk about goonbaiting just a little more. So goonbaiting is the act of baiting gooners into your streams, videos, social media pages by teasing possible explicit content of yourself or your media, but never really going all in and maintaining a slight sliver of plausible deniability.
Guys, I saw a woman wearing yoga pants and a woman wearing a bunny suit and fishnets.
Like dangling the carrot in front of your viewers and never letting them have it. You use sex or other raunchy and or NSFW themes to create a hot, goon-worthy atmosphere, but you never go all out. You can moan or say vaguely dirty things or show off your feet, casually mention parts of your body, accidentally make a suggestive sound, or unintentionally say something suggestive, so you get clipped and you go like, tee-hee, not like that, don't clip that.
Yeah, I know the touch of a woman because I am a woman and I touch myself.
Oopsie! The entire reason for this behavior is to draw in Gooner audiences because you know that they're going to show up in droves, especially for your personal attention. And it never gets erotic because the tease is stronger than the actual act, or you have a separate, explicit site for them to visit off the main site. At the end of the day, you're just fishing. They're pretty good at it, especially because they know their audiences. And what do I mean by know their audiences? Well, it's simple. Ethoughts, both IRL and the VTubers, know that they're fostering an audience of lonely, desperate incel, simp, or gooner men and creating parasocial relationships with them because these men, attached to them, come back for more and more. There are also VTubers who cater to not only degenerates, but true goon degenerates, who get off on, lollies.
Yeah, but I'm not VAT registered, so I don't get like extra bonuses. Yeah. I'm just self-employed.
By using infantilized voices, speech mannerisms, and personalities, but again, carrying enough plausible deniability that when accused, can defend themselves by saying things like, well, I'm an adult woman, so it's not like it's real, but they know exactly what they're doing. None of this behavior is unintentional. They know their audience, and they know how to bait people. This is where true goon baiting and goonslop exists. After all, gooners want to become worse and worse, so to really appeal to them, you need to push the boundaries of the taboo and depraved, which is why so many of these content creators push the boundaries of what's acceptable to draw in more audience with their increasingly degenerate behavior. Now, if you think I'm being unfair on the primary source of goonbait and want me to bring up things like video games, such as Marvel Rivals or other NetEase games like First Descendant or other Eastern-based games that tend to have very sexy and sensual female characters or sell very skimpy outfits, I think there's a strong core difference between this and explicitly goonbaiting. For example, not only is goonbaiting and goonslop more centered around the tease and the chase, but also your attachment to the people who are baiting you. A person and individual is more likely to successfully bait you than a program or a video game because the person can talk to you. What's really important here is the development of the parasocial relationship. Not to mention, especially for games, there's a greater desire to entertain you and keep you playing the game more than there is just a desire to get you off on their video game. Yes, sexy skins sell. People like playing with sexy skins and looking at sexy skins, but there is such a giant fundamental difference between I can play a sexy black cat in Marvel Rivals and I watch a VTuber who, every time I donate, calls me her good boy. The parasocial aspect is what makes the goon baiting so strong. It's not just about seeing something sexy, it's the validation and the humiliation, arousal and release and interactivity. It's the untouchable touch. For a gooner, this hits all the right boxes. After all, being a gooner isn't about getting the girl and winning the day, it's about being a loser. When you feed the arousal itch and the degradation itch in one, you've got the gooners. But you have to be careful to not overly feed into it, or you risk making the simps angry or disgusting the normies. It's a careful balance, one that people know how to exploit. These people? They're not idiots. They know what they're doing, and they know how to play simps, gooners, or other undesirable, pathetic men. Now that we have very specifically laid out goon baiting and how it works, I want to address one thing. One thing goon baiting and queer baiting both have in common, as previously mentioned, accusations based on ignorance. Because being openly sexual or sensual or attractive does not necessarily make you a goon baiter, and having characters wear skimpy clothing or act sensually or be attractive is also not explicitly goon baiting. After all, gooners and catering to their like is so specific, I'd only really call it a creation of the modern era of copious amounts of pornography being pumped out on the internet all day long. Sometimes I wonder if people who spend too much online have so much unintentional exposure to porn or Rule 34 that they, almost like a gooner, start to see it in everything and everywhere. But instead of becoming attracted to it, they are disgusted and they hate it. And they feel so strongly that the internet is so full of porn or goonslop that it begins to reflect on everything they view. If there's even a chance of Rule 34 being created, it is gooner bait. Which is funny, because before now, it was just kind of an accepted part of the internet. Why do you think it's called Rule 34? Rule 34 was, if it exists, there is porn of it. No exceptions. Everyone knew it existed. Everybody knew it was out there. But as the internet has grown and its users have grown, it has only gotten more and more prevalent. To the point where when Gamoverse released, there were over 800 images of the main character on Rule 34 before 2 days had even passed. With how many artists, especially Rule 34 artists, exist online, it's only common logic that they will rush to draw sexual images of the first new thing to release as soon as possible. But just because copious amounts of Rule 34 exist, or just because a character may bat their lashes or wear a bikini or have a moment of sensuality, does not mean it is goon bait. If this is the criteria that we're basing things off, then I suppose all of the following are also examples of goon bait.
I like to build the world aside and furnish it with porn. Draw hentai pics and girls with dicks and tinted
guess that about wraps everything up. Really, I'm just kind of disappointed to see the constant flood of Goonslop accusations for relatively harmless media like Gamoverse that didn't have anything to do with that. I feel like we've been taking steps backwards in regards to sexuality lately, especially in the creative space. People are stripping the value of so many things due to the presence of an attractive woman. It's not even the Gooners or the Simps or the Incels that are complaining about it. Is it misogyny? I mean, nobody really complains about sexy and attractive men, not really. Maybe I'll never really know the deep mystery of where this came from or why it's hitting so hard and why the younger generation seems to have become so Puritan. Maybe it's because of the copious amounts and they're just exhausted of it. And that on that level I understand, but they developed a very particular sensitivity. Perhaps we'll only ever speculate on where exactly the shift happened, but like most modern problems, I choose to blame social media and its constant corruption on our minds. I really wish I could end this video on a more conclusive point, have some strong or impactful statement to make, but after looking everything over, all I can really say is, honestly, I'd still hit if I could.
I like to